What up, y'all? It's your boy Rodimus back at you once again, and I'm back at you with another video. On this video, we are going to talk some football. Now, yesterday I dropped a video talking about football, of course, but on the NFL level. If you haven't already, please go out, check out the latest video I dropped talking about quote unquote America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, and what happened last year, what may happen this year as far as the Cowboys are concerned, and that whole talk about Super Bowl or bust, if you will, and all that type of stuff. You know, every year we got to talk about the Cowboys. But like I said, if you haven't already, please go check it out. It's on YouTube right now. It's on the Point of View YouTube channel right now, plus Facebook. So let me know what your thoughts are on that one. But on today's video, we are going to talk about some Southeastern Conference. We are going to talk about the SEC. You know, the SEC has a slogan where they say it just means more, and it does. And if I could be a little biased here, the SEC is still, yes, to me, they are still the best college football conference in all of the world, in all of college football. Yes, the Big Ten has won the national championship the last 3 years, Ohio State, Michigan, and Indiana last year. But nonetheless, I still personally think the SEC, you know, being that I was SEC born and raised, is still the best conference in all of the land. It is what it is. Now, last week they had their annual media days. Some new coaches were introduced, you know, giving their vision for what they want the teams to be and all that type of stuff. Of course, you got the heavy hitters of the SEC, the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Texas A&Ms, the Alabamas of the world, things of that nature. You got teams that are looking to rebuild and hit the reset button, like Auburn, Florida, things of that nature. I mean, Vanderbilt won 10 games last year. That says a lot. Vanderbilt won multiple games last year. So it'll definitely be interesting to see where Vanderbilt falls this year. But nonetheless, as I mentioned, the Big Ten, they had their annual media days. The ACC had their annual media days. And of course, it's a lot of discourse between the Big Ten and the SEC, things of that nature. But that's neither here nor there. It is what it is. Let's get on to some SEC football conversation, if you will. Now, last year, there was a four-way tie in the SEC. And the teams that finished in that four-way tie are Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Alabama. Ole Miss, their only loss was to Georgia back on October 18th. They lost 43-35 at Georgia. Georgia ended up losing to Alabama at home on September 27th, 24-21. Texas A&M, they ended up losing to Texas at the Longhorns 27-17, November 28th. And Alabama ended up losing to Oklahoma. I remember that game. Pretty much I remember all these games, to say the least. Alabama lost to Oklahoma at home 23-21 on November 15th. And speaking of Texas, I didn't have this in my notes. You know, there was a lot of talk about Texas, if you will, and I'll talk more about them a little later. Arch Manning. It's a lot of talk about him. He's coming back once again for another year. He's going to be the starter. Now, I do have to admit, I, like everybody else, thought that he should have went number one, thought that he should have came out last year, but being how he played first half of the year, not so much. Second half of the year, he kind of turned it up a bit. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where he lands after this year, if he'll go number one. You know, he's got a lot of other quarterbacks, if you will, in the mix. Will he win the Heisman Trophy, that sort of thing? So basically what I'm saying is next year's class, as far as quarterbacks, not just SEC, but overall, next year's class as far as the NFL draft is going to look spectacular. Chambliss from Ole Miss, Dante Moore from Oklahoma, Arch Manning from Texas. A lot of quarterbacks are coming out after this season, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where they land. But that's neither here nor there. But like I said, there was a four-way tie in the SEC, and it was just another wild year, another wild season in the Southeastern Conference, if you will. And so somebody had to win, somebody had to lose. Unfortunately for Ole Miss, They did not get to play in the SEC championship. It was between Georgia and Alabama, and I will definitely have a lot to say about that. So it was definitely interesting to see how things shaped out, if you will, as far as that four-way tie from last season. Speaking of the SEC championship game, last year it came down between Georgia and Alabama. Georgia ended up winning the SEC title for the third time in 4 years. And by all metrics, by all predictions, if you will, and I'll give my own towards the end of the video, a lot of people are picking Georgia to go to the SEC title game, possibly win. Who knows what will happen. But as far as Alabama is concerned, and I'll have a little part in the video where I talk about them, this was basically pure domination on the part of the Georgia Bulldogs. Because Georgia ended up winning that game 28-7. And Alabama could not run the ball. They basically could not run the ball all year. Let's just go ahead and throw that out there. Alabama could not run the ball all year. Do you want to know how many yards Alabama had in that game? The SEC title game? You want to know how many yards? Alabama had a combined total of -3 yards. I repeat, Alabama had a grand total in the SEC title game. A grand total of -3 yards. Georgia, on the other hand, had a combined 149 yards rushing. 149 versus -3. Which one are you going to take? I don't know what Coach DeBoer had in mind as far as his game plan. You know, Ty Simpson, who got picked in the NFL draft this year. There's a lot of talk about that. I don't know what game plan he had, but clearly it didn't work. Clearly it did not work. To only have -3 yards in the SEC title game and you get whooped, that's not a good combination, people. I'm sorry. That is not a good combination. And it definitely showed. And once again, the Georgia Bulldogs ended up winning their third SEC title game in the last 4 years. So Alabama definitely needs to regroup, if you will. Because to say that they had an interesting season, let's just go ahead and talk about it. They definitely had one interesting season. They started off their season against Florida State. And nonetheless, they ended up losing. They ended up losing the first game of the year on the road against the Seminoles and got upset 31-17 against Florida State. Now, granted, Alabama's season did look promising. They won, I think, like 10 or 11 games last year. But nonetheless, to start the season off on the wrong foot, boy, people would not let Alabama live that down, and nor should they. Now, granted, after this, they went on an 8-game winning streak, so things were on the up and up as far as Alabama is concerned. But they did have some close wins during that streak against Georgia, if you will, Missouri, and South Carolina. They almost got beat by South Carolina. I remember that game. They almost got beat. They won in a tight game against the against the Dogs, 24-21 during that streak, as I mentioned. So they had a nice little stretch. But after that, they would go on to lose on November 15th against Oklahoma at home, 23-21. Oklahoma was simply the better team between the two. They finished the regular season in a close game against the Auburn Tigers in the annual Iron Bowl at Auburn. They ended up winning that game 27-20, which honestly, by all metrics, with the way Auburn played last season, you would have thought that Alabama blew them out. But Auburn put up a good fight, and I'll talk about a lot as far as Auburn's concerned and everything like that. As I mentioned, they got whooped in the SEC title game. They avenged their loss in the college football playoff in the first round against Oklahoma, the same team who beat them at home. They avenged their loss in the first round, 34-24 against Oklahoma. Then they played Indiana. Oh my God. They played Indiana. And you talk about an ass whooping. Y'all thought that Alabama and their negative 3 yards rushing was bad. They basically laid down and quit when they played against Indiana, who would go on to win the national championship. And oh yeah, Fernando Mendoza, who was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, was the quarterback. Okay. Curt Cignetti, Mr. Cignetti, was the head coach and is still the head coach. So, I don't know, like I said, I don't know what Alabama's mindset was. I don't know what their game plan was. But Alabama basically laid down and, excuse my language, they fucking quit. That's what they did. They fucking quit. And I'm not even an Alabama fan, but I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed with how they played, the execution, the defense, everything in between. Indiana played like the better team, and they were the better team. Again, they went on to win the national championship. Alabama ended up going home and getting whooped by 35 points. Talk about embarrassing. That was truly embarrassing. Alabama's season ended in blowout fashion. That was simply inexcusable, to say the least. Let's talk about some hirings and firings as far as the SEC is concerned. And I tell you what, man, not just the SEC, college football overall, I have never, and I don't know about y'all, I have never seen so many firings in all my years of watching sports, especially college football. I have never in my life seen so many firings in 1 year. It seemed like no matter what team it is, if that team lost, I don't care if it was a close game, blowout, whatever, that coach got fired. From Penn State to Auburn, the mess at LSU, so on and so forth. It was just a mess. It was a bloodbath. Okay? It was a complete bloodbath. Even the day after the game, the Sunday, somebody got fired. You never knew who was going to lose their job. Now, let me state for the record, I'm not saying that I'm glad they lost their job. I would never celebrate anybody losing their job. But the thing is, college football, and even with pro sports, it's a ready to win now league. If your team is not up to par, if your team is not playing up to standards, if you're not coaching to the standards that the school expects you to be or that your players expect you to be, evidently you gotta go. You gotta go. And it's a lot of schools right now paying buyouts to these coaches. Now, granted, some of them found other jobs elsewhere, but nonetheless, I have never seen so many firings in my life like we did last year. It was just ridiculous. Like, honestly, it was a lot of firings going on in the world of college football. But speaking of the SEC, there were 6 schools. Well, technically I'm counting 4 that made some head coaching changes, if you will. And there were a lot of players that transferred elsewhere, things of that nature. So let's just go ahead and talk right into it. Let's just go ahead and get right into it. I'm sorry. As I mentioned, there were a lot of schools that made drastic changes, and in some cases, rightfully so. We're going to start off with the Florida Gators. Florida, their season was a mess. Their season was a complete mess. I don't know, I don't know what they had going on, but nonetheless, it was just not up to the Gator standard, if you will. Kind of what I just talked about with Alabama and the way their season ended. It wasn't the Alabama standard, to say the least. But as far as the Florida Gators are concerned, they ended up firing Billy Napier, who ended up getting another job elsewhere. They ended up hiring John Summerall. He served as the head coach at Tulane. So he's going to be looking to turn that program around, if you will. Auburn, they ended up firing Hugh Freeze. Auburn, they ended up hiring Alex Golesh. He was the former head coach at USF. Auburn, the last 2 coaches have not worked out. And don't even get me started on Brian Harsin. Don't even get me started on that. You know what I'm saying? The last 2 coaches have not worked out. Last season, I think they fired Coach Freeze like 2 or 3 weeks before the season ended, like before the Iron Bowl or whatever. Anyway, he just had to go. And a lot of players ended up leaving. Cam Coleman's at Texas. I think Deuce Knight's at Florida State. A lot of players ended up leaving, but they also gained a lot of players. And I'll talk more about that towards the end of the video when I give my predictions. But we'll see how Coach Golesh looks to turn things around on the Plains, if you will, because 5 straight losing seasons, they can't afford a 6th. Next, we have Kentucky. They relieved Mark Stoops of his duties. He's no longer the head coach. Kentucky ended up hiring Will Stein, who served as the offensive coordinator at Oregon. And last but not least, Arkansas, they fired Sam Pittman. They ended up hiring Ryan Silverfield, who served as the head coach at Memphis. So again, a lot of changes, and we'll see how things shape out with these schools, not just Auburn and Kentucky, but a lot of schools, as I mentioned, looking to turn things around and hit the reset button, if you will. And there are a lot of schools, honestly, that definitely need to hit the reset button, especially those that I just mentioned. Now, one hiring, and I guess you can call firing or departure, however you want to put it, that I didn't mention. Lane Kiffin, LSU, and Ole Miss. Oh my God, the drama between Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Now, LSU, they ended up firing Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was not a good fit at LSU. Let's just go ahead and throw that out there. He was not a good fit at LSU. They knew it, and they ended up paying the consequences for it because they're having to pay him hit the rest of his contract. Yes, they're paying a buyout. And they ended up hiring Lane Kiffin. Now, Lane talked about why he didn't coach Ole Miss through the playoffs. I think he said that they wouldn't let him because they knew he was going to take the job. They knew, Ole Miss knew, everybody knew that Lane Kiffin was going to take this job. Coach Kiffin was going to take the job. And there were going to be a lot of players that were going to look to transfer or leave Ole Miss to follow in behind him and things of that nature. And honestly, man, this was just a mess. This was a complete mess, and it was very unfortunate for Ole Miss. You know, they got into the playoff and played their hearts out and things of that nature. It was just unfortunate how everything went down. You know, Lane Kiffin is not the most trustworthy person, if you will, but he's a damn good coach. And I tell you one thing, I don't know how y'all feel, and I'm kind of glad that we've sort of moved on from this. It's going to be a lot of eyes on Lane Kiffin. It's going to be a lot of eyes on the LSU Tigers. It's going to be a lot of eyes to see what kind of team he has and what they'll do on the field. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure they're going to be definitely improved, to say the least. And I tell you what, I told a coworker this a few months back. If Lane Kiffin, within the next 2 to 3 years, does not deliver a national championship to LSU, what are we doing? Like, literally, what are we doing? I think he signed like a 6 or however long the contract is. If he does not bring a national championship to LSU within the next 2 to 3 years, I feel like this is, I don't want to say a colossal failure, but this is definitely going to be a failure. And Ole Miss is going to end up laughing at Lane Kiffin if he does not, for some reason, bring a national championship to LSU. And I see people already saying national championship or bust. Like, the man ain't even coached his first game at LSU yet. And folks already talking about national championship or bust. Slow your roll, pump the brakes. Let's see how the season shapes out, okay? Yes, they're going to be in the conversation. Yes, they're going to be in the conversation for the college football playoff and all that type of stuff. But let's just pump the brakes here. The man ain't even coached his first game yet. However, Ole Miss went on to promote now former defensive coordinator Mike Golden, if you will, to head coach. And honestly, no, Pete Golden, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Mike. Pete Golden was promoted from defensive coordinator to head coach at Ole Miss. And I tell you what, that September 19th game, September 19th, Lane Kiffin, the LSU Tigers, Coach Kiffin returns to Ole Miss. He returns to Oxford. And they will play Ole Miss September 19th. That's already a week 3 game. That's a week 3 game. Like, what are we talking about here? You can't tell me a lot of eyes are not going to be on that game. I'm going to be watching that game. I'm going to be keeping up with that game. Okay, Coach Pete Golden and Ole Miss are going to look to have the last laugh against their former head coach, Lane Kiffin, and the LSU Tigers. And I think that's a night game on top of that. That's a prime time game. So a lot of people are going to be glued to the TV, if you will. And I guarantee you everybody and their grandma are going to be glued to the TV watching that game. I don't know who's going to win. I ain't made my prediction on that game. I won't make my prediction until then, once everything has settled down and stuff like that. But that game is definitely going to have a lot of eyeballs, to say the least. The 9-game format, the 9-game schedule format. I got to talk about this. I don't like it. I tell y'all this, I don't like it, but I understand it. The reason they did this is because they want to eliminate what they call cupcake games or cupcake schedules. Isn't that what we call it in college football? Cupcake schedules. And I thought about this last night, man. How many times have we seen teams like Alabama, Florida, Texas, Georgia, USC? Don't even get me started on Notre Dame and Ohio State, Michigan. How many times have we seen teams like that have those type of schedules, the easy way out? How many times have we seen those teams take the easy way out towards the national championship? And then late in the season, they have that one little loss. That one loss. And now it's like the end of the world. So I understand why the SEC wants to do this, but I don't like it. Because at first it was 6 games, then it turned into 8 games, then now it's 9 games. It reminds me of the talk about the college football playoff and how they want to expand to 24 teams. If you're going to do that, eliminate half the season. If you're going to do that, eliminate half the season. Don't even do no stuff like that, man. What is the deal with wanting to expand? This is just a side note here. What is the deal with wanting to expand? Okay, we've got 12 teams. That's another thing I don't like, but I'm comfortable with it now. I think they should have started with 8 and kept it at 8. Now they're talking about 16, 24, and all that type of stuff, man. Just leave it alone. And that's how I feel about this format, man. Just leave it alone. But then again, like I said, I understand it because you want to watch your team have the best competition. You want to have your team play the best competition, right? You know what I'm saying? All this playing this D3 school, this school, that they're going to blow out. It gets tiresome after a while. So, it is what it is. But the format goes as follows. They're going to have 3 fixed annual opponents, 6 rotating opponents, and every team plays everyone every 2 years. So like I said, I kind of like it, but I don't understand what the need of it is. But it is what it is. So we'll see how this works. I think it will work, despite the fact that, I'm sure there are a lot of people like myself that don't like this format, but I think it'll work. Because like I said, you want your teams to have the best competition and play the best competition. So we'll see how things shape out there. Let's talk about some key games. Let's talk about some key conference games, some key non-conference games, if you will. I tell you what, this season is going to be very spectacular. Very, very, very spectacular, to say the least. And looking at some of these games that I've written down, I didn't write every single game down, but games that I thought were important. We are in for a very good season. We are in for a very good ride as far as this college football season is concerned. We kick off things September 5th. Baylor versus Auburn in Atlanta, the Chick-fil-A kickoff. I think that's what they call it. That should be a good one there. Clemson versus LSU on that same day. That should be a good one. Louisville against Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to try to pick up where they left off. I think that'll be a good game. Oklahoma and Michigan on September 12th. Ohio State versus Texas, week 2. That is a week 2 game. These two are already playing 2 weeks in. That should be one hell of a game there. So I'm definitely going to be checking that one out. Florida and Alabama. As I mentioned, Alabama got upset by Florida State last year. They cannot afford to lose against Florida State this year. I tell you what, it's a lot of talk about Alabama. If Alabama loses to Florida State, if they lose to Florida State again, Coach DeBoer's hot seat is going to be, his seat is going to be so hot he's not going to want to sit down, okay? Because it's a lot of talk about him. He's lost 8 games in 2 years. He hasn't brought the team to what I mentioned earlier, the Alabama standard, but the guy's a good head coach, okay? He's won 20 games in 2 years. What more do you want from the man? We know he's not Coach Saban, okay? Coach Saban, he's even talked about that. He's talked about what Alabama is compared to what Alabama was when he was coaching. So Alabama, Coach Saban, he knows Alabama like the back of his hand. I mean, he won 6 national championships. He coached the team for damn near 20 years. So coming from somebody like that, he knows Alabama like no other person, right? So again, that should be a good one. LSU and Ole Miss, as I mentioned, September 19th. I'm definitely going to be glued to that one. That is going to be, to me, game of the year. That's going to be game of the year. I'm calling it right now. Alabama and LSU, November 7th. That should be a good one as well. What else we got? Georgia and Ole Miss, November 7th as well. Florida and Auburn, September 19th. We got a bunch of games here. We got a bunch of games that are going to be really good, whether they're conference games, non-conference games. Regardless, like I said, we are in for a very good season this year. Now let's talk about the standings from last year. As I mentioned earlier, there was a 4-way tie in the SEC. Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas A&M, Alabama, all finishing 7-1. Texas, they came on a little strong towards the end of the season. They, as well as Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. Yes, the Vanderbilt Commodores. They finished 6-2 in conference play, all 3 teams respectively. Missouri and Tennessee, they both finished 4-4. LSU, who won 7 games under Brian Kelly, well, not necessarily under Brian Kelly, but the fact of the matter is they ended up winning 7 games. They won 3 games in conference play. Kentucky and Florida won 2. Auburn, what a mess of a season they had. They ended up winning just 1 game. They finished 1-7 in conference play, as well as Mississippi State and South Carolina. And Arkansas ended up finishing last. 2-10 overall, 0-8 in conference play. And that season was just a wash. Let's just call it what it is. That whole season was just a wash. I kind of feel like the players quit on Coach Pittman, but it is what it is. They had to make a change. They're another team in college football that's looking to hit the reset button. And as I mentioned in the SEC title game, Georgia defeated Alabama, or pretty much blew out Alabama 28-7. Now, my predictions on this year. What do I think will happen this year? I tell you what. The SEC with this 9-game schedule, things are going to look mighty different. There's going to be a shift, if you will, as far as, teams improving, teams regressing and all that. We already know LSU is going to be much improved this year, okay? Coach Kiffin is there. He's got a new staff, a bunch of players and all that type of stuff. So LSU is definitely going to improve come this season. 2 teams who I think people should look out for. 2 teams who I think will make a lot of noise in the SEC, and I feel like will improve, and that is the Auburn Tigers and the Florida Gators. I predict that Auburn will win 9 games and Florida will win 7. Now, as far as Auburn is concerned, if they really play their cards right, if they really work as a cohesive unit, they can shock a lot of people. Okay, they got that week 3 matchup against Florida at home, at Jordan-Hare. That's going to be a good game. You know, Florida's got a tough schedule. But as far as Auburn's concerned, I've seen a lot of people predict between 6 and 8 games. At first, I said 8. I'm going to go 9. I think Auburn's going to win 9 games this year. I think they're going to vastly improve. And I think they're going to win 6 games. The sky's the limit for Auburn. The sky's the limit. They got a new coach, new staff. They lost a lot. They also gained a lot. So let's see how things shape out with the Tigers as far as the Gators are concerned. Looking at the standings last year, Florida ended up winning 4 games overall. I think they'll win 7 games this year. I think they'll win 7 games, but I think they'll go 4-5 in conference play. I think Florida will definitely improve compared to where they were last year. Teams who I think will regress. I think Oklahoma and Tennessee will still be in that middle tier, to say the least. I think Missouri will somewhat regress. I got them winning 6 games overall. I think Vanderbilt will go 500 this year. They no longer have Diego Pavia. You know, they got a decent team, you know, from what I've seen. So let's see how things play out with them. But I think they'll end up regressing and going 500. I think they'll go 6-6 after the 12-game season. I think they'll go 3-6 in conference play. The last 2 teams in the conference, I'm going to say Arkansas, and I think Missouri. I mean, not Missouri, but Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State will end up finishing last. I think they'll go 1-8 in conference play. I think Arkansas will finish second to last, if you will. I think they'll go 3-9. You know, they're still in rebuilding mode, if you will. So I think that's how things will shape out. Like I said, LSU, I'm going to go 9 games this year. I think LSU will go 9 games under Coach Kiffin in his first year. The top 4, I'm going to say Alabama. They finished 4th last year. I think they'll go 10-2. I think Alabama will also surprise some people this year. Texas A&M, they finished 3rd last year. I think they'll also go 10-2. So who are my top 2 teams in the SEC? My prediction for the SEC title game in December, I'm going to say the Texas Longhorns and the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think both teams will finish 7-1 in conference play. I think overall both teams will finish 11-1 overall. And I think the Georgia Bulldogs will end up winning the SEC title game for the 4th time in 5 years. But then again, who knows? Those are just my personal predictions. Y'all let me know in the comment section. Y'all let me know what you think will happen as far as SEC football is concerned. What team do you think will improve? What team do you think will surprise a lot of people? What team do you think will regress? And who are your predictions for the SEC title game, if you will? Let's see how everything shapes out. Like I said earlier, man, I am ready for some football, collegiate, NFL, all that type of stuff. I am just ready for some football, period. Some nice fall, winter weather to get us through the year and all that type of stuff, man. I am ready. What about y'all? Y'all let me know in the comments about the SEC and how you feel and how you think things will shape out. But with all that being said, as usual, like I always say towards the end, y'all like, share, subscribe, comment, follow on Facebook, hit that notification bell on YouTube, all that great stuff. My name is Rodimus. This has been my point of view, and I will see you guys next time.